I woke up alone in a forgotten village in France, the sun barely illuminating the cobblestone streets. It was 8 a.m. when I realized that my wife and her friends had left, laughing and leaving me behind. My phone had no signal, and my flight back to Paris was in just 3 hours. Each distant laugh echoed like a knife, revealing the betrayal behind the laughter. With my heart shattered, I recognized that the only thing left was loneliness. My name is Andre. Trust, just like my love, had crumbled into nothing. Those hours dragged on as if time were mocking me. I walked around the village, trying to absorb the beauty surrounding me, but every flower I saw reminded me of Clara's indifference. The gentle breeze brought no comfort, only an echo of my disillusionment. As I wandered through the cobblestone streets, the smiles of passing tourists felt like an insult to my pain. The town, so full of life, contrasted sharply with the solitude I felt in my chest. Hugo was trying to help, sending supportive messages amidst a sea of confusing emotions. "I'm here for you," one of them read. But how could I feel supported when the person I loved most seemed to have chosen to distance herself from me? That afternoon, I decided I needed answers, not just empty words. If Clara thought she could have fun without me, I too had to discover who I was without her. I passed by the central square and saw a cafe that caught my attention. The idea of a hot coffee seemed comforting, so I went in, choosing a table in the corner away from the windows. I ordered an espresso and, while I waited, I looked around at the people nearby. Families, happy couples, all those vibrant interactions made me feel even more anxious. The waiter brought my drink, and I took a sip, trying to feel a bit of energy, but the bitter taste only reflected what I was experiencing. That's when my mind began to wander. I remembered the moments I spent with Clara, the promises we made to each other. Where did we go wrong? Life felt like a movie where I was the desolate protagonist, struggling against a plot that no longer made sense. It was hard to accept that the woman I loved was far away, laughing with friends, while I battled my lonely demons. That cafe became a temporary refuge. I tried to jot down my feelings in a notebook I always carried, but the words felt empty, as if I were narrating someone else's story. I gave up and closed the notebook, feeling frustration rise. That's when Hugo called. "Andre, where are you? I'm worried," he said, his voice heavy with concern. I explained the situation, reluctant to mention the betrayal burning inside me, but it was impossible to hide my pain. Hugo suggested we meet up. I needed a friend by my side. After a few minutes, I left the cafe and started walking toward the spot we agreed to meet. The breeze was starting to chill, and I noticed the sun was setting, painting the sky with warm colors. The beauty of the moment had no effect on me. My heart felt cold and distant. As I approached the square, I spotted Hugo sitting on a bench, looking just as worried as I felt. His expression brightened when he saw me, but quickly returned to a serious demeanor. "How are you holding up, buddy?" he asked, and the sincerity in his voice touched me. "I don't know if I'm okay, Hugo. I was left here as if I didn't matter," I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. He looked at me with compassion, and for a moment, I felt like I could break down in tears. "Don't forget that you are important," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. But his comforting words were like balm on an open wound. We decided to walk through the village, talking about trivial things, trying to push away the heavy thoughts. Hugo spoke about his latest experiences, and I tried to focus, but the image of Clara having fun somewhere else lingered over me. Suddenly, Hugo stopped and said, "Andre, you need to face this. You can't let what happened ruin your life." I knew he was right, but how to begin? As time passed, we decided to enter a local restaurant. The food was delicious, but each bite felt like a battle against the indifference I was experiencing. While we ate, Hugo started asking about the state of my relationship with Clara. "Hugo, I don't even know if there is still a relationship. I feel like she has distanced herself so much that I don't know how to reconnect," I confessed, feeling frustration rise again. Hugo remained silent, reflecting on his words before responding. Maybe it's time for you to talk to her. Don't let this drag on. The thought of confronting Clara terrified me, but at the same time, it felt like the only way to find some clarity. Our conversation made me realize that, no matter how painful it might be, I needed to face the situation head-on. When the meal ended, we left the restaurant, and the cool night breeze made me feel a bit more alert. The glow of the stars in the sky seemed promising, although I was still trapped in my thoughts. We walked towards my inn, and with each step, I felt that the decision to talk to Clara was becoming more urgent. I needed to understand what had happened, why things had changed so drastically. The town was beginning to fall asleep, but I still held on to hope that, at the very least, the truth could offer me some peace. Hugo accompanied me to the door of my room, and before saying goodbye, he told me, "Remember, you're not alone. I'll be here no matter what happens." Those words soothed my heart a bit, but reality loomed like a shadow in my mind. As soon as I entered the room, loneliness enveloped me again. I looked out the window and saw the lights of the village flickering in the distance, as if calling me to face my destiny. I knew that by dawn, I would need to make a choice, seek the truth, or remain in the darkness of uncertainty. With a heavy heart, I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come, only tumultuous thoughts of love, betrayal, and hope. When the sun finally rose, a new day brought with it a mix of courage and anxiety. I decided I could no longer live in the shadow of doubt. I got up, put on the same wrinkled shirt I had worn the night before, and left the room. The smell of fresh coffee wafted through the air as I descended the stairs, and the kitchen was illuminated by a ray of sunlight streaming through the window. Hugo was already there, sitting at the table with a look of concern that only a true friend could have. "You don't have to face this alone, Andre," he said, taking a sip of his drink. "I'm here to help." His words sounded like balm, but I knew the fight unfolding inside me was something only I could confront. I sat across from him, trying to organize the thoughts swirling in my mind. What if this is all just an illusion? What if Clara is happy without me? I asked, almost in a whisper. Hugo shook his head, as if to dismiss those ideas. "You can't think like that. What really matters is how you feel and what you want. Don't let fear stop you from seeking the truth." Hearing him, I felt a wave of gratitude. It was comforting to know that, despite everything, there was still someone willing to stand by me, even when the world felt like it was crumbling. After coffee, I decided I needed to find Clara. The idea of confronting her terrified me, but the desire to understand the situation and, perhaps, regain what we had pushed me forward. Hugo offered to accompany me, but I knew this was a battle I had to fight alone. He respected my decision, but not without reminding me that the truth could be liberating, even if painful. With a knot in my stomach, I took the car and drove through the village's narrow streets, each turn leading me to a place that now felt strangely familiar, yet distant. Memories of our time together began to flood back. The laughter, the plans, the knowing glances. Clara had always been the light in my life, and the thought that this light might be fading unsettled me. Finally, I arrived at the hotel where Clara and her friends were staying. The historic building exuded charm, but to me, it was just a place that held the source of my anguish. I took a deep breath and walked in. The receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, greeted me, but her presence did little to ease my anxiety. I asked about Clara's room, and she gave me the information, but a wave of hesitation paralyzed me for a moment. What if she didn't want to see me? What if her friends were there, laughing and joking, oblivious to the emotional storm I was carrying? As I climbed the stairs, each step felt heavier than the last. I knocked on the door, and after a few seconds that felt like an eternity, Clara opened it. Her expression was one of surprise, and I could see a glimmer of confusion in her eyes. "Andre, what are you doing here?" Her voice was soft, but there was a tone of something I couldn't quite identify. "We need to talk," I replied, trying to stay calm. She hesitated, glancing back as if assessing what might happen next. Finally, she nodded and let me in. The room was decorated in vibrant colors, but the atmosphere was tense. Clara's friends were outside, which gave me a bit of relief, but I knew the conversation ahead would be anything but easy. "You didn't tell me you were coming," Clara began, but I interrupted her. "Clara, I can't understand what happened. One day we were planning our life together, and the next you decided to leave as if nothing mattered." Her expression softened, but there was a mix of pain and confusion on her face. "Andre, I just needed some time. I was feeling suffocated. It wasn't a betrayal." Her words, though sincere, didn't erase the wound I felt. Time for what? To have fun without me? To share moments with your friends as if I didn't exist? Frustration crept into my voice. And I realized I was letting my emotions take over. Clara took a deep breath and her hands trembled slightly. "That's not how I saw it. I thought you would be happy to let me go for a while." The conversation unfolded in a whirlwind of emotions, with each of us trying to express our pain and desires. Clara explained that the trip was a way for her to reconnect, to rediscover who she was beyond being a wife. I couldn't understand how that didn't include me. "You could have told me. You could have taken me with you instead of leaving me here," I argued, my voice faltering a bit. "I should have done that," she agreed, tears beginning to glisten in her eyes. "But honestly, I was afraid of losing you completely. Sometimes we need to step away to realize what we really want." The silence that followed was heavy, and for a moment, I thought that the wound consuming me might heal. As the words hung in the air between us, I realized that the decision I feared to make might be simpler than I imagined. Love still existed, but it needed to be nurtured with trust and communication. This reunion was an opportunity, and a question formed in my mind. Was I willing to forgive and rebuild, or was it time to move on? As the conversation progressed, the answer began to crystallize. The path wouldn't be easy, but at least now there was a chance. I needed to decide if I still believed in us or if I should take another step into the unknown. And so, as the shadows of the past slowly dissipated, a new light began to emerge before me, and I knew I had to face this new phase of life with courage. If you're enjoying this story and want to follow the development of this plot, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming chapters. With the sun slowly setting over the village, I decided to go for a walk, hoping the fresh breeze could clear my confused mind. Every step I took seemed to echo the questions swirling inside me. Why did Clara feel the need to leave me? Was there something more I wasn't seeing? The pain of betrayal still burned in my chest, but a spark of curiosity pushed me to seek answers, even if they were hard to hear. The town was quiet, and the cobblestone streets led me to a small square where children played and couples strolled hand in hand. The scene was so normal and peaceful that it almost made me feel guilty for being so tormented. Looking at a group of laughing teenagers, I realized that life continued even when mine seemed to have stopped. A feeling of loneliness enveloped me like a heavy cloak, but it was in that moment that I decided I couldn't allow myself to sink into sadness. As I walked, I remembered the conversations I had with Hugo. He had always been someone who tried to help me see the other side of situations, even when I was so consumed by pain that I couldn't see beyond it. Since Clara left, Hugo had become my safe harbor, trying to distract me with movies and long walks, but I felt I couldn't simply distract myself. There were questions that needed answers, truths that needed to be spoken. I didn't know how Hugo had dealt with Clara's absence, but I knew he cared about what was happening between us. The connection we had was always strong, and I didn't want it to deteriorate because of the confusion in my personal life. When I returned to the inn, I called him, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety upon hearing his familiar voice. He answered on the other end, and before he could ask how I was doing, I started speaking. "Hugo, I'm in a strange place right now. I don't know if I'm ready to face all of this, but I need help."
He listened attentively, the concern in his voice palpable. I explained how lost I felt and how the situation with Clara left me in a state of constant uncertainty. Hugo encouraged me to focus on myself, to understand that, regardless of what Clara decided, I needed to find a path that made me feel whole again. After our conversation, I began to reflect on what I really wanted. There was a thin line between love and betrayal, and I needed to know where my heart stood. There was a little cafe on the corner of the street that always caught my attention. It was a cozy place, with outdoor tables and the aroma of fresh coffee. I decided to visit the cafe, hoping that the simplicity of a good espresso would help clear my mind. Sitting at the table, I watched people pass by. Each of them had their own stories, and that made me realize that life was a tapestry of intertwined experiences. A nearby couple was discussing their vacation, and their laughter made me smile, even if just for a brief moment. I didn't want to become someone bitter or disillusioned. I needed to find a way to deal with the pain, but also to learn to love again, whether it be for Clara or for myself. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed a group of women approaching. Among them, one stood out. Her laughter was contagious, and the way the others followed her showed she was the life of the group. This image made me think of Clara and her friends, who were far away, enjoying moments that didn't include me. A pang of jealousy hit me, but I soon realized I shouldn't get stuck in that. Clara's choices were hers, just as mine were mine. After a few hours at the cafe, I decided to return to the inn. When I walked in, Renata was sitting in the living room, and her concerned gaze met mine. She had traveled to the village after hearing about my situation, and although her presence comforted me, I knew she was confused about everything. I sat down next to her, and our conversation flowed naturally, as if time hadn't passed since we last saw each other. "I don't understand, Andre. What happened between you two?" Renata asked, her voice gentle yet firm. It wasn't easy to expose my feelings and the frustrations that consumed me, but I realized I needed to be honest, not just with her, but with myself. I explained the situation, revealing the pain of betrayal and the feeling of abandonment. She listened carefully, and her expression shifted from concern to understanding. "Your father always said that love is a choice. Sometimes people make decisions that hurt us, but that doesn't mean you should lose hope." Her words resonated with me, making me think about what I truly wanted. What would be more painful, facing the truth or remaining stuck in a love that perhaps no longer existed? That question echoed in my mind. Night fell, and the village lit up with warm, inviting lights. As we talked, I realized that, despite the pain, there was a path ahead. A decision needed to be made, and I could no longer procrastinate. I had to confront Clara, understand what was really happening between us, and decide if there was still space for forgiveness. With this new resolution, I fell asleep that night with a spark of hope. The dawn would bring new challenges, but also the possibility of a future, not just with Clara, but with myself. It was time to open my heart and seek the truth, no matter how painful it might be. I woke up that morning with the first rays of sunlight filtering through the curtains of the small house where I was staying. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted up from downstairs, and for a moment, the illusion of normalcy enveloped me. However, reality soon imposed itself, and the memories of the previous night hit me like a wave. I got out of bed, still feeling the weight of Clara's betrayal on my shoulders. What more could I discover? What was hidden behind her carefree laughter with her friends? I slowly descended the stairs, each step a reminder of my isolation. Hugo was already at the table, as always, with his wide smile and a cup of coffee in hand. He noticed my somber expression, and without words, tilted his head in solidarity. "How are you?" was all he said, but the concern in his eyes spoke more than any elaborate phrase. It was comforting to have a friend like him by my side, even though I didn't know what to do with the feelings of betrayal and abandonment burning inside me. "I don't know," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm trying to understand why she did this." Frustration rose in my throat, and I knew that with every word, my emotions intensified. Hugo encouraged me to speak, his hands firmly placed on the table, as if anchoring my internal turmoil. Sometimes people make strange choices. You need to remember that this isn't a reflection of who you are, Andre. It's about her. Hugo always had a way of reminding me that the responsibility wasn't solely mine. But still, I felt pulled by a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. I decided it was time to act. I needed to know the truth.
The pain of uncertainty was far worse than any answer I might receive. I need a plan, something to help me put things into perspective, I told Hugo, who nodded in agreement. He suggested we take a walk around the village. The fresh morning air and the stunning scenery might help clear my mind. I agreed, albeit reluctantly, and together we set out to explore the cobblestone streets and the small squares adorned with flowers. The voices and laughter of tourists filled the air, but the sadness in my heart was undeniable. As we walked, each new path we took reminded me of Clara and what she might be doing, far from me. A part of me wondered if she was happy, if she really needed that trip to feel free. I thought of the happy moments we shared, and the bitterness mixed with nostalgia. I love this village, Hugo said, trying to shift the focus of the conversation. There's something magical about it, don't you think? Yeah, but the magic seems to have disappeared for me, I replied, frustration shining through in my voice. Hugo paused for a moment, looking at me with a mix of compassion and concern. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm here, and I always will be. Eventually, we found a small cafe that looked inviting. We sat at an outdoor table, and as we enjoyed our drinks, an idea began to take shape in my mind. What if I talked to Clara honestly? I asked, almost disbelief in what I was saying. I can't keep going like this, not knowing where we stand or what we're facing. We need to have a conversation, even if it means confronting painful truths. That sounds like a good plan, Hugo said, supporting my decision. You need to express how you feel, and she needs to hear it. It's not fair for you to carry all this weight alone. The following hours passed in a blur of thoughts and strategies. The idea of confronting Clara made me nervous, but also determined. Deep down, I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. Life was passing by, and I was paralyzed in a maze of uncertainties. When I returned home, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Each step I took felt heavier, and the mix of anticipation and fear consumed me. I found Renata on the sofa, her expression worried. Andre, how are you feeling? She asked, and I realized her presence brought me unexpected comfort. I'm trying to understand, Mom. I have to talk to Clara. I can't stay in this limbo, I confessed, sitting down next to her. She looked into my eyes, her gaze filled with love and understanding. Only you can decide what's best for you. Remember that life is made up of choices, and each choice leads us down a new path. Just don't be afraid to seek what truly matters. Her words resonated in my mind as I thought about what lay ahead. The reunion with Clara would be crucial, not just for us, but for the possibility of a new beginning, whether as friends or lovers. I needed the truth, no matter the cost. It was time to confront my fears and open my heart. With the thought that the truth could be liberating, I prepared for the conversation. What would I say? What questions should I ask? Anxiety pulsed in my chest, but a growing determination was forming as well. As the night wore on, the house filled with a heavy silence, and I knew that the next morning would bring the decisive moment. I decided that at dawn, I would call Clara. The thought of hearing her voice and confronting her was terrifying, but the desire for clarity and to close the cycle of uncertainty gave me courage. My mind was a whirlwind, but I couldn't run from the truth forever. That night, as I lay down, a series of memories flooded my mind. The smiles we shared, the plans we made, and the intimacy we created over the years. Everything felt distant now, as if I were watching someone else's life. Was it possible to recover that? I wished Claire understood the depth of the pain I felt, but I also wanted to know what had led her to make her decisions. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I would face my truth and seek hers. The tension in my stomach was almost unbearable, but the hope for a new understanding guided me. If there was a chance to rebuild what we had, I couldn't let it slip away. With those thoughts, I fell asleep, determined to find the light at the end of my pain tunnel. The journey that awaited me would be difficult, but I was ready to face the challenges to come. I woke up to the sun filtering through the curtains of my room, the warm lights of the day bringing with them a new wave of hopes and insecurities. I looked around. The place still felt so familiar yet so distant, as if there were an invisible barrier between the life I knew and the one I was living now. Clara's absence weighed heavily in the air, and I couldn't help but think that she was laughing and having fun with her friends, completely oblivious to the turmoil consuming me inside. Breakfast, which had once been a shared ritual, was now just a solitary task. The meal tasted bland, mirroring my emotional state, but I knew I needed to break free from that cycle of despair. I decided a stroll through the village might help clear my mind. As I walked along the cobblestone streets, I saw the colorful flowers adorning the houses, the smiles of the locals, and the aroma of fresh bread wafting from the bakery. It was as if everything around me was vibrant and full of life, while I felt like a spectator, trapped in a sad film. I was drawn to a small square where some young people were playing soccer and laughter echoed. The contrast between their joy and my melancholy was disheartening. In a moment of despair, I sat on a bench and watched, trying to find meaning in their carefree interactions. Hugo called me later, his familiar voice bringing me a bit of comfort. He always knew how to make me feel like I wasn't alone, even in moments of intense solitude. When I mentioned my intention to talk to Clara, he encouraged me to be honest about how I felt. Sometimes the truth is what we need to move forward, he said. Those words echoed in my mind, igniting a desire for sincerity that had long been suppressed. I began to think that if I wanted to understand what had happened between us, I would need to get to the bottom of it. That night, as the sky turned into a cloak of stars, I took my notebook and began to write. Putting my thoughts on paper helped me organize the confusion filling my mind. I detailed my feelings, from betrayal to loneliness. With each word, each line, it felt like a part of the weight on my chest was dissipating. I wrote about the pain I felt and the longing that grew like a weed. Writing became a cathartic expression of my inner self, a way to give voice to everything that had been hidden. However, a part of me still hesitated to send that text to Clara. What if she didn't care? What if her response confirmed what I feared? The fear of rejection and abandonment haunted me again. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't continue living in the darkness of uncertainty. My heart was tired of battling these emotions. And so I took a deep breath and pressed send, releasing all my insecurities into the universe. Days went by, and the silence became deafening. Every notification on my phone made me jump, but none were from Clara. Hugo encouraged me not to lose hope, but as hours turned into days, uncertainty began to morph into desperation. I went to the beach, a place that had always brought peace to my heart, and let the sea breeze carry me away. Watching the waves crash made me reflect on what truly mattered. Life is like those waves, sometimes calm and beautiful, other times tumultuous and full of challenges. Finally, in a moment of introspection, I realized I needed to open up, not just to Clara, but to myself as well. The pain of betrayal shouldn't be the sole focus of my life. I decided I needed to confront my mother, Renata, who had tried, in various ways, to understand what was happening. Despite the emotional distance that had formed between us, the concern in her eyes was evident. I called her and, with a lump in my throat, explained what I was going through. Renata listened attentively, her soft voice conveying a sense of security. She didn't have all the answers, but she was willing to support me in any way she could. Sometimes you need to step away from what you love to realize what truly matters, she said, and her words sounded like a mantra.
With that, I realized that perhaps Clara's absence was an invitation for me to rediscover myself, a chance to reevaluate not only my marriage, but also who I am. If the truth about us wasn't what I had idealized, then maybe it was time to seek a new path, even if it meant treading unknown ground. Tomorrow, I decided I would go to the village where Clara and her friends were staying, not to confront her, but to seek the truth I so desperately craved. If there was any chance of salvation, I needed to know. And if the pain lingered, at least I would know I had tried. This journey, filled with uncertainties, was my first step toward healing. I hoped that at the end of this path, I might find a new clarity, a new direction, whether with Clara or without her. If you've ever been through similar situations, share your stories and lessons learned. Dialogue can help us find a path through the darkness. When I returned to the village after my stroll through the square, the sky was already beginning to darken, painted with shades of orange and purple. The sight reminded me of what Clara and her friends were experiencing, while I felt increasingly like a stranger in my own life. The house was silent, and the echo of my footsteps seemed to amplify my loneliness. I looked around, noticing the details that had once seemed charming, but now only reinforced my helplessness. The walls were adorned with photos of happy moments that felt like they belonged to another era, and the idea that Clara was far away, enjoying that lightness, made me feel a knot in my throat. I picked up my phone in hopes of a message, something that could connect me to her, but the screen remained dark, devoid of any signs of life. I looked out the window and saw the reflection of a lost man. I was no longer the confident Andre I used to be, but someone who felt small in the face of the pain of betrayal. I decided then to reach out to Hugo. I needed his presence, his familiar voice that always brought me some comfort. I called, and after a few rings, he answered. "Hey man, how are you doing?" His voice sounded welcoming. "I'm trying to hold it together, Hugo. Clara and her friends are having fun, and, well, I'm here." The sadness in my voice didn't go unnoticed. "Do you want me to come over? I can catch a flight and be with you in a few hours," he offered, showing his unwavering loyalty. "I don't know. Maybe it's best if I stay alone for now. I need to figure this out, what I'm feeling." I felt that talking about it might make me even more vulnerable, but I couldn't help it. "Just don't isolate yourself too much, Andre. I'll be around if you need to vent, okay?" His words were a relief, even if temporary. I hung up and sat at the kitchen table, where a cookbook lay open, a reminder of plans we made together. I stared at the blank page, as if it could offer me answers. In that moment, I realized I needed to seek answers within myself. I grabbed a pen and began to write. Each word became a silent scream, an attempt to understand the turmoil burning inside me. As I wrote, I remembered Renata. She always had the ability to listen to me without judgment, even with the confusion in our relationship. Preserve the original language of the text were genuine. I decided it was time to call her. As soon as the call connected, her familiar voice calmed me a bit. "Andre, my son, how are you doing?" The concern was palpable. "Mom, I'm struggling. Clara went on a trip with her friends and I feel abandoned. I don't know how to move forward." I was direct, avoiding embellishments. "That must be really tough. You shouldn't be alone. Why don't you come home? We can talk about all of this," Renata suggested, her voice overflowing with maternal love. "I know you want to help, but I need to sort this out by myself. I need to understand why this hurts me so much. I can't just ignore that she's having fun while I'm here, not knowing what to think." The words spilled out as I tried to organize my feelings. "I understand, but sometimes it's good to have someone by our side, even if it's just to listen. You don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you." "I always will be," she replied, trying to comfort me. After hanging up, I reflected on everything Renata had said. She had always been the first to support me,
even when I felt lost. This realization made me think about the importance of the relationships around us. After all, solitude doesn't heal, it only intensifies the pain. I grabbed a bottle of wine from the shelf and poured myself a glass. The warm drink went down, bringing a slight comfort. That night was long. I took a walk through the village, noticing the lights shining in the houses, each seemingly telling a different story. The laughter coming from a nearby restaurant reminded me of the joy we once shared. The pain of betrayal was a difficult weight to carry, but at the same time, I realized I couldn't let it define me. The love and loyalty I expected from Clara were not just a matter of expectation, they were reflections of what I valued in life. However, I didn't know if I could still trust her. The memories of the promises we made mingled with the reality that she was far away, distracted. The love I felt now seemed like a shadow of what it once was. As I returned home, I decided I needed to face this situation head-on, not just in relation to Clara, but also in relation to myself. What did I really want? What did I expect from her? The answers wouldn't come easily, but I was determined to find them. The silence of the house welcomed me once again. As I looked at the photos of happy moments, I realized that the next conversation with Clara couldn't be about accusations, but about understanding. The words that separated us needed to transform into a dialogue that sought the hidden truth beneath the feelings of betrayal. And so, I went to bed with my mind full of questions and a small spark of hope that somehow we could find a way back to each other.